So I'm Arlen Meyers. I'm with the Society of Physician Entrepreneurs and work with Anthony at MI10, amongst other initiatives. Anthony, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, welcome. I'm a practicing pediatric cardiologist with a AI background.
Great. So this conversation is going to be about AI generally, AI in drug discovery and development, and from different perspectives. So, Brent, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself and tell folks what you're about?
Certainly. Yeah. Hi, I'm Brent Vaughan. I'm the CEO and founder of a AI drug discovery company called Eratos Therapeutics. At Eratos Therapeutics, we use spatial computing and AI to be able to map nanoscale interfaces and identify new targets and use that as a basis for predictive modeling for being able to design new therapeutics. And my background has been split pretty evenly between developing drugs, both large and small molecules, in multiple indications. So some oncology, some cardiometabolic, but in the last 20 years, really CNS focused. And then I've also worked on just the technology platform side as well. But most of it, the last 20 years have been pretty focused in CNS and continue to think CNS is an area where, especially with things like AI, we can move the bar the greatest.
And just briefly, what has been your professional and entrepreneurial background? How did you get into this gig?
Yeah, I remember telling Anthony the story once upon a time. I was supposed to be another in a long line of doctors, and I decided to go down the dark side and not go to medical school, but went to business school and ended up working in the biotech industry. And I've worked there my whole career. I've started now 4 companies in the therapeutic space, and was lucky enough about 10 years ago to start a company that ultimately became the first machine learning and computer vision software as a medical device that was approved by the FDA for the diagnosis of a CNS condition. And so going down
Well,
that path, there's a small number of people that are bilingual in AI and data science and biology. And it turns out that intersection is pretty interesting.
yeah. So great. Thanks for joining us. John, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. John Shufeldt, emergency medicine physician by training and avocation. I've had a number of entrepreneurial endeavors over the years and had a number of exits and a larger number of failures. About a year ago, I partnered up with a gentleman who's done drug discovery for 30 years, and my role in that company is to just scale and bring on the resources needed to expand it. It's called
Thank
VivaMed
you.
Biopharma.
So let's get started with this. So let's just start off a little bit. So, Brent, for those that don't understand, you said you were an expert or in spatial biology. So could you just define that term?
Yeah, for sure. I think that maybe a way to think about it is when people think about spatial computing, and I think the obvious applications are robotics, right? Trying to get machines and the AI that controls those machines to think in three-dimensional space. So robotics, drones, right? These things need to think in three-dimensional space to be able to navigate. What we're doing is we're taking some of those concepts of spatial computing and we're applying them in a nanoscale. Right, so being able to understand spatial context, getting all the way down to near atomic level. The kind of the basis for this, as we think about it, is the brain is the last organ system in the body that we don't have a fundamental model for how it works. That's why we can't make an artificial brain. We can make artificial kidneys, we can make artificial livers, artificial lots of things, but not a brain because we really don't have an idea of how it works. And we're now at the point where the has got so that we can start to see molecule to molecule and molecule to receptor interactions in a near atomic level, and we can start to map out. And it turns out spatial context is just as important in biology as it is in the macro environment.
Right. So I'm going to ask each of you, in one sentence, what excites you the most about AI's impact on drug discovery and development? Anthony?
I think the fact that all the proteins are now figured out, I think is just a treasure trove of possibilities towards precision medicine for the first time. I see hope for that.
Um, great. Okay, John?
Really, it's compressing the time from kind of biological insight to a clinical candidate that is in a way measurable and repeatable and scalable. It's so just a time compression factor.
So speed to value.
Speed to value.
And Brent?
So it's hard to go last because the good answers are taken. I think that besides just wave one, which is just automating stuff that we already did, right? And then wave two is how do we find better ways to do stuff we do? We're getting to the point now where AI is allowing us to find and do things that we haven't done before. And I think if you think about drug development, everyone focuses on the idea of type 1 error, right? When we think something's going to work and it doesn't work. And I would argue the biggest misses in therapeutics are type 2 errors, the things that would work that we never tried. And so I think when you think about being able to, like John just mentioned, being able to compress, get closer and closer to autonomous science through use of agentic AI, as well as just automating processes we can start to pursue more hypotheses that never would have been pursued before. And I think that the biggest wins will come from those risks that currently have not been taken.
Okay, so how would the group, and just as an aside, if for those that are joining the call, if you have a question or you want to hear something, just put it in the chat and we'll address it rather than waiting toward the end. Just sort of big picture, what's smoke? And again, this is to the panel. What, in your opinion, is smoke and what is mirrors? I mean, what's real in AI and drug discovery and development, and what is nice to have, should have, future, just hype, all that. So what do you think? Brent, we'll give you the first shot at it.
Okay. That's a big question. I'll maybe confine my answer to this space that we're working in. I think that I think that one of the things that has a lot of promise and is real is this concept that AI can help us understand things in much higher dimensional space. We can all think in 3, 4, half dozen dimensions pretty well, but we don't think in 1,000-dimensional space very well. And so historically, we've taken high dimensional space and we've reduced it down to low dimensional space so our human brains can interact with it. And I think what we're doing at Eratos is we found a way to think and reason in high dimensional space using AI. And so that it enables you to find interactions and relationships that frankly humans just would not have found. And we think it has the promise of moving this aspect of science from driven so much by serendipity and being driven more by engineering, starting to trade off scientific risk for engineering risk.
John, hope, help, or hype?
I would probably argue, Brett, if you look at how penicillin was discovered, there was a great degree of serendipity in it. And when we look at AI and when we use it, we look at it for shots on goal. We can just take a lot more shots on goal with target prioritization, hit and lead optimization, trial design, and patient stratification. So it's not, a lucky mold on bread. It's shots on goal.
Anthony?
Yeah, as I said, if you look at the movie The Thinking Game, and I think it's a relatively well curated and realistic look at what's happening, I think we're just scratching the surface. So I would say hope in capital letters.
Okay, good. So the gang is asking that the panelists please put their contact information in the chat in case, whether it's a cell phone or whatever you want to put in there, so folks can either email you or get in touch with you by LinkedIn. Okay, good. So we sort of looked at the big picture of this thing, but let's try to get into some specifics. So Brent, maybe you can walk us through a specific example of how AI has changed at your company, drug discovery and development.
Sure. So a little detail on kind of how we apply it. So one of the things that we're doing for mapping and identifying new targets in the brain is we are taking brain tissue and we're using a process called expansion microscopy to expand it to the point where we can actually see protein level resolution with a confocal microscope. So for the first time, we can actually see things interacting. And our basic premise is that biology runs on chemistry, and chemistry requires physics. At the end of the day, two molecules have to be able to be in physical proximity, and they can bind, they can cut, they can change shape. That's all it can do, right? And so one of the things that we were able to do is we were able to look at research that came out of our co-founder's lab at MIT, where he expanded and looked at these protein and receptor interactions across the brain. And he found a novel association between an amyloid fragment and a type of glutamate receptor that had never been reported. And so this was quite interesting that they seem to be co-localized, right? But with the technology of doing pull downs, et cetera, you could see that they were enriched together, but you didn't understand anything about the spatial relationship. We were able to map this down and actually be able to see this in space. And we're able to see that the amyloid is physically influencing the glutamate and changing the shape of the glutamate receptor. And so we can now map the binding pocket, and we can see that amyloid influencing these glutamate receptors changes what binds to them. And so it creates an idea of a selective target for a type of glutamate receptor when it's being influenced by pro-inflammatory amyloid. And you could design a drug for that that wouldn't modulate all of the native unimpacted glutamate receptors. And so for us, this is a novel target. And we've now gone through the data sets, and we found 1,000 other of these types of spatially constrained or conformed targets that allows you to think about designing something for that degree of specificity, because in CNS, right, when we have a drug in there, it's not always the off-target effects that cause our dose-limiting tox. It's very often the on-target effect. When you hit a glutamate receptor, you hit all the glutamate receptors. But if you could design a drug that only hit the glutamate receptors that were being impacted by amyloid, which was causing a pro-inflammatory cascade, and not hit all of the other glutamate receptors, that's a whole new way to think of kind of precision medicine, which is kind of what Anthony mentioned earlier.
Okay, so I'm a visual learner, so it's really hard for me to understand like gravity and electricity and stuff you can't see. So are we talking about three-dimensional video graph databases where you can turn it inside out and upside down and do all that other stuff?
Yeah. Do you want me to try to show you like
Yeah, if you could
5 or
show me
10
a
seconds of
video.
it?
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. Yeah, show me a picture.
This is fun because everyone gets to see the 65 different tabs open on my computer at the same time. So that's always entertaining. Um, okay, let's see here.
Yeah, we can see your screen.
All right, can you see
All
that?
right, cool. Yeah,
Excellent.
see a
All right,
bunch of dots.
so I'll do a super brief setup. I will not be long, I promise. So what happens in expansion microscopy is you take a piece of brain tissue or any tissue, you slice it up in like 100 slices, right? And then you take each one of those slices, you embed a mesh in it, and then you can expand it. And when you expand it, what's super important to understand is everything expands proportionally. And so you can take receptors, you can take proteins, you can break them apart and spread them out. You can then label them, and then you can put them back together. And since everything expands proportionally, you maintain shape and spatial relevance, okay? So you get these beautiful images, and they look really cool, and they show up in the cover of Nature articles, and they're great. What you see here is actually not an image. This is a computer model where we took those 100 slices, we reduced them all the way down pixel by pixel, and created kind of high dimensional representations of every one of those pixels in the image, stacked those 100 images back up again. And when you do that, you get something that looks like a picture, but it's not a picture. It's a three-dimensional model. And you can go all the way in. You can have it find novel colocalizations. So you see a receptor here that we found. You can see the binding pockets that we can model. You can understand this in three-dimensional space, so in XYZ coordinates. So you can then turn around and ask it, does this receptor exist in the wild type, or is this only in pathology? You can find other novel receptor protein colocalizations. You can go in and model them, and you can go all the way down to being able to model what that binding pocket looks like. And then from that point, you can go straight from binding pocket design, if you can model it precisely enough, straight to rationally designed drugs to interrogate that pocket and skip over months, if not years, of high throughput screening and assay development.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So to get back to your point about workforce development, there aren't a lot of folks, I would imagine, like you said. I mean, Anthony makes the point that there are fewer data scientists than there are astronauts that understand healthcare. So maybe Anthony, you could chime in, or John. But how do you find people to do this stuff? And because we're hearing a lot about, the United States is the only country that doesn't care about math. And there's grade inflation and all kinds of stuff. And there's an article today about UC San Diego, which is supposed to be a flagship University of California school, and most of the kids that are in the
I mean, I can chime in a little bit. So one of the things we've done is partner with ASU, Arizona State University. They have 30,000 engineers graduating or in 4 years of
what you're
classes at one
doing
time.
amazingly.
Yeah, so we actually have a plethora of these young academics coming out of school who have various engineering and computer science backgrounds. So we have not had a difficult time finding really the creme de la creme of data scientists and engineers.
Yeah, so John, I think everybody should know that John is working with a new medical school at Arizona State University. And he won't tell you this, but I will. He's got his name on the building. So, John, can you just briefly tell us what that's about?
Well, fortunately, there's no building yet there. It's called the John Shufeldt School of Medicine and Advanced Medical Engineering. And I always laugh because it's a school I can never get into. But in 4 years, the students will walk out with an MD degree, but also a master's in engineering. And most of the engineering is going to be AI driven or AI focused. And so the first class, I've been looking at applications. I've looked at about 35 applications out of the like 600 or so we've received for 36 spots so far. Rock stars. And it'll be heavily innovation focused, heavily AI innovation focused, but also they'll graduate with an MD degree. So we're trying to build physician engineer innovators in 4 years, which will be dramatic. One of the things I found just so amazing about it was, we're all back in the gross anatomy days where your hands were pickled and you smell like formaldehyde and all your friends abandoned you because you smelled so bad. The anatomy will all be VR. And so imagine doing gross anatomy using virtual reality headsets and pulling off organs and muscles and tendons one by one with your hands. And so you don't have to smell like formaldehyde anymore. Medical education is being redefined, and it's pretty exciting.
So, Anthony, I read that Google and Meta and all these people are sort of trying to hire the best and the brightest when it comes to their AI teams, and that a significant percentage of the people they've already hired come from China. So what is your take on that? Because you've been all over the place and spent a lot of time in China, talked about this. So what's going on?
Well, as you heard partly during the AI Med meeting, I think there is some reshuffling of talent between the US and China, but I think ultimately a significant portion of the Chinese data scientists I talked to still would very much like to come over to the US and perhaps will neutralize some of the political differences right now that we have that may even be temporary right now. So I think they have the longer term vision, which is more collaboration rather than competition.
So other than hoping that the geopolitical environment changes in the near future, I mean, hope is not a strategy. What do you think we should do? I mean, you're obviously doing it. John's doing it. Several of us are trying, but where's this going to go?
Well, I fully realize hope is not a strategy, but it shouldn't be out of the equation either, right? So I think what the Chinese have done is shown the US that when pushed to a negative situation, that innovation can get you out of that hole. And I was very impressed when I was there last time to see some of the advances in the AI area sector in China in terms of doing its best without the highest, quality chips. They've been able to work around that. So I think innovation sometimes is lacking in AI, ironically. It's an innovative field, but it's sometimes lacking in innovation. So I think innovation, I think, in AI is very much needed, which means things can be done cheaper, faster, and better.
Brent, what is the present fundraising environment for AI drug discovery companies?
Yeah, it is interesting, I guess would be the word for it, right? I think that people notice a few, you see things like Zara, who goes out and raised $1 billion in their Series A, with, Mark Tessier, Levine, and those groups. And I think people notice some of those, but I think for the rest, it's it's a bit of a challenging market in that it's about trying to find the right investor. Most biotech investors, going back to that kind of, there's very few people bilingual in these. Most biotech investors tend to be pretty AI skeptical. But I think more importantly, if you talk to most people that have made money as biotech venture investors, most of the people on that side are very asset focused right now. Right, a good friend of mine that actually started Alnylam. Right now, Alnylam has become a pretty large, successful company. He said it's really simple. If you can be in the clinic in 6 months, we're excited. If you can be in the clinic in 12 months, we're interested. Beyond that, come back to us when you can be in the clinic in 12 months. And so I think people are really asset focused right now. I'm a bit of a contrarian. I think that's a good time to be thinking about what are those platform-driven pipelines that are going to create the next generation of assets, because the assets are starting to get picked over more and more. But I think that what we're finding is that investor groups that understand AI and its ability to transform a legacy industry, so they're kind of AI first investors who are now learning their way through biology, we find that our discussion resonates with them much more than biotech investors who tend to be just more asset focused right now.
So John, this gets to the business model and the ROI. So in response to Brent, and we should mention that you're the head of a venture firm called Accelerant Ventures. So you're doing this, you're in the trenches, and your team is looking at deals and all that. So what from an investor perspective, how do you factor in the AI, the X factor, into a potential investment decision?
Well, and pretty much every pitch we get, the two letters AI somehow find their way into it. And some of it is very hype-ish, and there's little value to the AI that they're bringing to it. In fact, there's little AI that they're bringing to it, save for, a ChatGPT sort of AI model. AI can be a real accelerant. It can build a great moat. The problem is trying to determine fact from fiction. And so we use a number of people to help us ensure that the AI models that they're bringing forward are in fact significant and will, kind of bend the needle or bend the curve, as opposed to just more hype. I'm not sure if
and when you say a significant number of people, who are those people? I mean,
they're AI engineers. I mean, they're basically computer engineers who are focused on AI. If it's drug development, or if it's even a SaaS model business that uses an AI model. I mean,
okay.
I went back to MIT, got an AI certificate, and you could fill a hangar with what I don't know about AI.
And you have a lot of hangars and a lot of airplanes.
Yes.
So that's quite a lift. All right. So we have a couple of questions. So Jim Barry, do you want to ask your question?
Sure. Mine was just pretty simple. It's great that you're creating a medical school, that curriculum, and developing innovators, but post medical school, where are they going to go? Are they going to go into residency and fellowship programs and have to conform to kind of the traditional medical education where being innovative is somewhat squashed? Or do you foresee them just going out into the world after medical school and not really getting their hands in clinical medicine?
So that is a phenomenal question.
And just let me interrupt for 1 second. Jim, tell John who you are and where this question is coming from.
Well, so I'm a neonatologist and involved in medical education in Colorado, and co-founder of NeoMind AI, which is a group kind of looking at AI in neonatal and pediatric medicine. But really think that our medical curriculum is not setting our medical students, residents, or fellows up for success. So I'm really excited to learn about your program and how you're thinking about this.
So thanks again for that question, and it's brilliant. Here's why. I didn't think of that. I had dinner with the dean of the medical school last night, and so this is 12 hours old for me. And we talked about the same question, and in my mind, I never thought that any of these folks would not go out into residency because that's where you learn. And one of the concerns was, wait a minute, if we're creating these phenomenal physicians that never practice, what good are we really doing what really good are we bringing other than, yeah, they can have system level changes, but if they're not clinically at the bedside, are they really accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish? And I think the answer is no. So my hope is, at least I found as a physician, I think physicians are born entrepreneurs, number one. And number two is, who better to change healthcare than the people who are embedded in it? So I think, and I hope this answers the question positively for you, particularly given your background, is that we're creating physicians who go through and complete residencies and fellowships, but have this mindset and the education training behind it to actually affect change. I mean, I tried to do it myself, and I didn't have anywhere near the scope and learning that these folks are going to have coming out of medical school. So I hope we're creating physicians first, innovators, and engineers second.
Yeah, and because I would say that most medical students today, they're remarkable individuals with their background and uniqueness that they have. But as soon as they set foot in medical schools, they all look the same. Most of the time when they graduate medical school, residency, fellowship, you can't pick out the engineers from the biology majors, from the philosophy majors, and that's wrong. We really need to cultivate uniqueness and individuality and push people to think outside the box. And our medical system is not set up for that. It's set up for conformity and just kind of put your head down and get the work done.
Yeah.
Yep.
Shai, you had a question. Thanks for that. Shai, you had a question about the regulatory environment.
Yeah, it nicely dovetails into exactly the comment that Dr. James Barry made. So I'm at Case Western Reserve Cleveland Clinic Lerner College of Medicine. We take exactly the non-traditional students, and we've devised actually an internal AI sort of a pathway. So we offer MDMS, similar to the Arizona State program. Sounds like it's an exciting opportunity for me to interact with the doctor there. My question is, I have several medical students who are working on several apps, if you will, on the side that enhance medical school education, that actually enhance their understanding. And then I feel like there's so much industry AI talk right now. Having just come back from the AI Med meeting with Dr. Chang, I feel that there's tremendous amount of momentum. And I feel like in healthcare, are we going to be sort of more passive about this? My students ask me about this all the time. Are we going to be more passive about this? Is going to be led really predominantly by the Magnificent Seven type AI healthcare companies, or are the individual, the talented pool, are we going to actually take a back seat? Because exactly what Dr. Barry said, we're going to put them through this traditional 4-year thing where they become homogenized and kind of the average physician, if you will. So any comments from the expert panel on, does this belong to everyone? Does it belong to the large industry, or is there going to be space for the young and sort of individual entrepreneurs?
And I interpreted your question as, and in addition, you were interested in the regulatory challenges, whether it's...
Yes,
okay.
Yes, please. Yeah.
Okay, so Brent, what's your take on that?
Oh, I like the other part better about whether or not small companies are going to have the edge. Yeah, I think briefly on the regulatory standpoint, I mean, I think that, well, actually a question, when you talk regulatory, are you talking about FDA specifically, or are you talking about the brighter regulatory framework?
The former.
Okay. I think that is, it is going to be a bit of pushing rope. Uphill into a headwind, right? That is just the FDA historically is is about is about risk aversion, is about trying to make sure primarily they're about safety, right? They're about safety even first and foremost before efficacy. And so I think that depending on how you're moving, how you're incorporating AI into your projects, they're going to need to be able to see that it at least clears the bar of what's gone before it. And what's gone before it is going to be legacy programs that haven't implemented AI. And so I think when we got our FDA clearance for the computer vision machine learning approach to diagnose autism, that's the only FDA cleared diagnostic tool for autism now. We were really just automating what clinicians already do, right? It's not, looking back, it was not groundbreaking, right? But it was groundbreaking for the FDA. It took years to get that through. I think if what you're trying to do is drug design and drug development, which is what we're focused on now, ultimately, you're going to have composition of matter and you're going to have clinical data. And the fact that it ultimately came out of a pipeline that was generated with AI might not be material to what the regulatory agency does. And so I think that if you're going to be on the leading edge of moving AI-enabled products down a regulatory environment, it pays to be thoughtful about what you're putting in front of the FDA. And if your product is a self-supervised AI that is going to be making treatment decisions, that's going to be a tough road to hoe with the FDA.
So Sharif, he said the magic words. The software is a medical device for autism. So do you want to comment on that?
Yes, but I wanted to hear a little bit. I think one of the interesting things
specifically. Well, why don't you tell people who you are and why I asked you that?
Sharif Taraman, pediatric neurologist, second board in clinical informatics. Brent actually hired me as the chief medical officer at Cognoa. That's how we met. Actually at AI Med, that's how we met. And then he hired me as the chief medical officer at Cognoa. And then I actually, on a side note, I don't know if you know this, John, but both Anthony and I have also advised the ASU Med School on some of the ideas that we should be thinking about and how do we help those students after they graduate and projects we should work with. So we should definitely connect offline at some point.
So glad to hear that. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. It's a very cool med school. I think it's going to fundamentally change. And I think to the point, Shaw, we've had programs before, but we've never really created the framework by which we unhomogenize, I think, to Anthony's point in the chat, the medical school curriculum, right? We want those opportunities for those learners to be a little bit creative and get outside of the box, if you will. I think the interesting thing on the regulatory side, there is this thing called the FDA Modernization Act 2.0. And fundamentally, the reason that it kind of came into existence, sort of talking about FDA stuff, is there was immense pressure on them to reduce the amount of animal testing that we do. And so one of the things that really the FDA is supposedly going to start doing is allowing for, if you can demonstrate very effective computer simulation and use artificial intelligence to demonstrate safety and efficacy, you might be able to bypass a lot of the regulatory steps. And so in addition to sort of speeding up the drug discovery platform to what John was talking about earlier, I think that there's also speed that you gain by using AI and drug discovery on the regulatory path.
Okay, great. Anthony, you hate software as a medical device. You want to push back?
I don't hate the term. I think it's just a fundamental lack of understanding of what AI and software can do. It's really organic, almost biological, if you want to think about it. It shouldn't be put in a category of words that FDA, I think, now is pushing back on, which is software as a device, or locked algorithm, which is even worse than software as a device. So hopefully, and I think FDA is coming around to a better appreciation for how powerful AI is without locking the algorithm and treating it as a software, treating it as a device, because it's anything but a device.
And I noticed in the chat, and I can't see it, but someone asked a question about looking for help to get their drug to market. Did I interpret that correct? I don't see that. But we can ask the question to the group. So, well, let me back up a minute. So let's just talk about the pharma business model and reimbursement given what we're talking about. So we all know that there's a lot of talk about expensive drugs and the business model isn't working and pharmacy benefits management companies and what's going on in Washington, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of churn in the system. So Brent, who's going to pay for this and how? Is this just going to be another blockbuster, first to market, $1 million a shot into your eye to treat gene replacement for blindness? Or is it going to be something different? Or should it be?
Yeah, I think that it depends on what, AI is the tool and it really kind of solves the problem you point it at, right? So if you decide that you want to go down the rare disease market, right? And people pointed the $1 million per treatment therapies and they catch a lot of flack, right? But this whole idea of going after rare diseases to do this came from Henry Tremere. This was Genzyme, right? And he is considered a hero in the industry for figuring this out. I mean, it just has been taken to an extreme now where companies forgo trying to go into larger indications because the economics and the ability to fund rare disease has been just it's a repeatable equation that's worked again and again. And so I think you can generate $1 million per dose therapies using AI or not using AI, right? So I think that's independent. I think that the ability, as John mentioned and Anthony both earlier, the ability to be able to do things so much faster, to get to when we start thinking about agentic AIs, we start to get to the idea of autonomous science, where you can actually have data come in like we can into our system. We can do the analysis literally in minutes that would have taken PhDs, a room full of PhDs, months to do through. Design the next experiment. And so you would say that you can leave the lab in the afternoon, you can come back in the morning and have all your experiments set up, ready to run. But in reality, it doesn't take overnight, right? It takes minutes to be able to go forward. And so I think that efficiency lowers the opportunity cost of pursuing a new therapeutic. And maybe that will start to move us away from going after rare disease. I mean, let's face it, so many of the dollars going to rare disease and immuno-oncology right now. And it's really hard to get people to want to pursue small molecules for some of these other indications. And so maybe by lowering the cost, because we can get closer to autonomous science to be able to move things forward faster. And going back to this idea of type 2 errors, there's a lot of we don't see the big bets that would have paid that we don't take. We only think about the bets we made that didn't work. And so I think lowering that opportunity cost allows us to look at a lot more of those. Ultimately, if you want to get things through payers, you need to show that you're delivering similar or improved outcomes at a lower cost. And so I think that is one thing that as we start to bring these new therapies forward, that if we can lower the cost of actually going after them, we can actually start lowering the cost of outcomes. And I think AI can be more of a help than a hindrance there.
So traditionally, there is no Moore's law in sick care. Every time we come up with a new something, we just tack it on to all the other stuff that preceded it. You start off with an X-ray, then you go to a CT scan, then you go to an MR scan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it just adds cost. So you, as a CEO of an AI-generated drug, are you saying that you will lower the cost, the price of your drug because you got it to market cheaper, better, faster, smarter?
So right now, and I started in larger pharma, right? Right now, the way the cost of a drug is determined is independent of the cost that it took to produce said drug. They're completely separate equations, right?
Exactly. So what confidence do you have that things will change?
So I think it has to happen on the payer side, right? Ultimately, when you get a drug approved, what really happens for your company to get inflection of value is you need to show you can get payer coverage. So it's all about those payer discussions. And payers don't really care what it costs. They care what standard of care costs. And so if you believe in basic supply demand and you think AI is going to allow us to pursue with higher throughput and lower costs, be able to pursue increase the supply, then supply and demand should ultimately start to bring price down. But I think AI developed drugs, they have the opportunity, if they have a lower cost structure because of a lower attrition rate, to be priced and be profitable at lower margins. But right now, that negotiation is completely separate from what it takes to develop a drug, whether or not you use AI.
How concerned are you? And John, why don't you chime in from the investor perspective, but how concerned are you that people are saying that China has taken over the United States in new drug discovery and development? And what impact will that have on what you just said?
Well, I can't articulate it better than Brent just did, actually. I think his answer was perfect. I am certainly concerned. There's still the issue with the FDA. There's still the issue with time to market. And we clearly have a plethora of scientists and clinicians working on drug discovery, as evidenced by this discussion in the U.S. So I'm concerned, but not overwhelmingly so.
Okay, Sharif?
I think it's actually a good thing. I mean, if they can create compounds in China faster and better than we do, that's good for the supply chain, as long as we don't block it or tariff the heck out of it, right? Because that's going to get new drugs to market. I think the thing that we have to kind of think about and the reality is we are very much globally connected, right? If COVID-19 didn't teach us anything, then I don't think we're ever going to learn. So we have to figure out ways to just work cooperatively to improve health and wellness across the globe. So I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that's a good thing. And you know what? That's good. Maybe they challenge us to do better at home.
And if our outcome is for improvement of patient care, Sharif nailed it. I mean, if it's for the better of the patient, then we should be supporting it and applauding it and not tariffing it, if that's the case.
Okay. What impact does this have on MD, PhD programs? So, this business of MD, PhDs is sort of gone through some transformation. First of all, they're incredibly expensive. They take 7 to 9 years. It's arguable how much research actually MD, PhDs actually do. Because you see a bunch of folks in the clinic cranking out RVUs with embroidered MD, PhD on their coat. They're not doing research. The research dollars are shrinking and are incredibly hard to get if you're a doctor, let alone a very, very deep domain expertise PhD. And beyond all that, so my question is, in the face of what we're talking about, AI drug discovery and development, and most of these programs, if not all of them, are in academic centers where the vast majority of the research, not all, is in drug discovery and development. Yes, they do orthopedic devices, and yes, more and more they're getting into some digital health stuff. But the large number of dollars that support the infrastructure and the payrolls are in drug discovery, targets, therapeutics, all that other stuff. So my question to the group is, what do we do with MD, PhD programs? And oh, by the way, graduate programs, all PhD programs are a mess. And the MD and the PhD graduate deans are trying to figure out, how do we fix this? Primarily because the likelihood of you're getting a tenure track PhD program in an academic center, I don't care what you're studying, is slim to none now. It's like less than 5%. So most of these folks go out in industry or they become clinicians or whatever. So my question is, are you concerned? I mean, is this another yeah? Or should we actually do something about it? And if so, what? And what skills will the next generation of drug discovery and development people need to be successful? So how does all this integrate into academic medical center, MD, PhD development programs? Anthony, you want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I think one of the comments I made recently is it took me 40 years to get to where I am in terms of being a pediatric cardiologist with a few wisdom nuggets along the way. And I think in the future, near future, someone 4 years out in pediatric cardiology will be able to have almost the same level of knowledge and wisdom. If we render AI correctly to enable these people to be that wise. And I think the same with MD PhD programs, Arlen. I think the traditional, 3 and 2 or 3 and 3 curriculum is going to be compressed to maybe 4 years at most. So I think that's the advantage of smart use of AI is going to really compress the training period.
So, John, is ASU a 4-year or a 3-year curriculum?
It's a 4-year, and I noticed in the chat I've been involved with the Mayo Medical School in Scottsdale, and yeah, the people are compressing to 3 years. Now, from my vantage, it's hard to imagine medical school in 3 years, but however, as Anthony just said, I think the intelligent use of AI, that'll be a reality.
Brent, from the standpoint of a pipeline of people to work in your company, what's your perspective?
Yeah, I think that I think that it's going to change how we think about medical professionals. And I think that just to be slightly maybe controversial, antagonistic, right? This I know that this is really a physician entrepreneur kind of group, right? But I remember one of my chief medical officers years ago, we were talking about something. He once looked at me, he said, "You know what, Brent, no one ever went to medical school because they're a risk taker, right? It's a risk averse move, right? You gain more knowledge before you go out to try to start things." And I think that one of the things I used to see from a friend of mine who ran a big clinic up at UCSF is she would say that when doctors came in for their annual rotation, you could tell what year they graduated from medical school by which treatment and prescribing mistakes they made, right? Because that was what state of the art was and so there's this idea that they got to a certain level and then they kind of stopped learning, right? And you see people like Sharif and Anthony Ono here who are the opposite of that, right? They've just continued to learn and learn and learn, which is what Anthony and I were joking about at the beginning. And so I think that what you're going to see is that you're going to see, as Anthony said, takes much less time to get to a certain amassing of knowledge and context. But going forward, it's going to be much more of a focus on continuous learning and continuous change, and much more about I've got to this level that was in my MD, PhD, and now I kind of then operate at that level. I think this is an area where there's been a lot of continuous learning. People are always, doctors have homework all the time, maybe more than lawyers, right? But I think that it's going to be an even bigger shift towards more continuous learning. And I think Anthony's right. I think that the hurdle to get to practice of medicine is going to become lower.
And what is to answer a question that someone asked about academic industry collaboration? From the one hand, we've planted a lot of barriers between academic medical centers collaborating with industry because of conflict of interest, because of taking money, because of influence, all that other stuff. To the point where faculties are banned from participating in speakers bureaus, for example, for drug companies. But if we're going to do this, the question is, don't we need more academic industry collaboration and ways for people to do that? And there are many, many countries in the world that are good at knowledge transfer programs. They place the chief marketing officer for a drug into the medical school as an entrepreneur in residence, and vice versa. They take somebody like you. I don't know whether you want to do this, but you spend time in a drug company.
Yeah.
So is that an issue? And if so, how do we address it?
Yeah, so I might be more controversial in this. I think that and keep in mind that I decided to go to industry and not go to medical school, right? And so there's a selection bias there, I suppose. I think that the way that we think about The arbitrary Chinese wall that we've put between industry and practice of medicine, I think it is short-sighted, and I think it's bad for the way we do things. And I think nothing more than look at what's happened in the last 12 months to places like Harvard and MIT and Columbia. So it turns out getting all that money from the government has an agenda as well. And when that agenda changes, suddenly you've got schools out there that have NIH funded programs that suddenly can't fund them anymore. And so I think the greatest institution on the planet for the extension of quality of life was NIH, right? And so I think that, and yet when you sit down, you talk to the folks at Harvard, you talk to the folks at MIT saying, listen, what about trying to figure out how to put some of the same type of conflict of interest guardrails that you have in other areas, but to try to figure out how to partner with industry? If I want to sponsor a research associate to do work inside of a lab for my co-founder at MIT, I'm not allowed to do it because he is a co-founder, right? I have to do it in some other lab. And so I think that all money, if you're in the business of raising money from people to go out and do work, all money comes with strings. And it doesn't matter if it's a venture investor like John, if it is someone at a government, or if it's industry. And so I think being dependent on one source and not thinking more broadly about how you fund this research, I think is just short-sighted. And I think that some of our institutions are paying for that now. Whereas trying to build diversified revenue streams would actually give them a little bit more leverage and power when they think about trying to manage some of these conflicts.
Particularly when the main sources of revenue, state support, clinical revenue, and grants are dropping. So the whole business model of academic medical centers in terms of revenue is under threat. So you need to figure this out. That's my point, and we've created barriers, except for the extraordinary individuals like John, who can come up with some bucks to fund this medical school. I mean, those folks are they're remarkable, but they're pretty unusual. So Johnny, you have a question?
I would like to add some point. 2 years back, when I was looking for a good AI-powered drug development course via Coursera, so there were nothing, literally. There were a couple of good courses on drug development, but nothing is there for AI-powered or how to leverage AI and predictive model to expedite drug development for rare diseases. So I would like to, actually there are a couple of courses, they are pretty much laddered, which means you can start with a certificate, then go through, diploma and degree. So my request is to you and for Dr. Chang, just to think about this, because Coursera is now, it's a like widespreading. You can use Coursera to upskill yourself. So
Okay.
my
Thank
request.
you. Yeah, thank you. Where are you? Just so we know, where are you located?
Presently, I am in Chicago, but I was in Denver, as I mentioned you via email.
Yeah, great. Thanks for the question. So Anthony, are you or did you have very much content at AI Med on drug discovery? And number two, is this something that is covered during ABAIM?
The answer is yes. We had a whole module, as you may or may not know, on AI and drug discovery and pharma. We're probably going to expand that to a track, given the clinical impact of this area in the very near future. So we do talk about it to some extent at the ABIM courses in terms of examples of how AI and drug discovery will be very valuable in the future.
Great.
I don't know. It was a long time ago. I don't remember what I was going to say.
Okay, so Shah wants to know how do we educate, and we're running out of time, so let's be quick with this. How do we educate mid-career physician scientists in all of this? And we need a short answer because this is a long conversation. So Anthony, just briefly tell us what you're doing.
Yeah, through the American Board of AI Medicine, which is now international. We're changing our brand because we're asked to go to different countries. I think it's very, very well suited for a mid-career, early career, late career clinician to jump in and get a very fast orientation and get certified through the different courses. We have 3 levels of courses, 1-day primer and 2-day intro and 2-day advanced courses. And people like Dr. James Berry here have taken that and really shaped the future of their field with that baseline knowledge.
Great, thanks for that. Okay, so let's shift a little bit for some final comments in terms of AI drug discovery entrepreneurship. So, Brent, based on your extensive experience, knowledge, wisdom, mistakes, etc., what advice would you give someone who is interested in this field, who is a health professional, or not, for that matter? Yeah.
Yeah, I think starting to expose yourself and find opportunities to use these tools, right? And to start to get more AI fluent, to start to understand, when people first start using AI, they use it like a Google search bar, right? And after a while, they get a little bit better at prompt engineering, they get a little bit smarter. So there's a phrase in startup culture, which is a bias towards action, right? And it turns out by jumping in and doing things, we actually learn things that we never could have figured out through just research. And so I would say start finding ways to use these tools. There's some excellent courses. I think Sharif was going to post one in the chat that one of our advisors to these computational biology and AI out at MIT has online, and start exposing yourself to the types of things that these tools can solve, because then it allows you to tap your clinical background and knowledge of here's the problems that need to be solved.
John?
I mean, I think there's 2 ways to look at it. So a while ago, I mentioned I went to MIT and got kind of the business AI certification, which was more process outcome focused, not the science behind it, not how to code. So I think if you're more interested in outcomes and business processes, look for courses like that. If you're interested in how it applies, how it's applicable to medicine, I think the board certification in AI medicine would be amazing. So
on this call and on this panel, we have more degrees than a mercury thermometer. So the question always comes up. I mean, Shufeldt's got a JD, he's got an MBA. I mean, the whole drill. And Anthony, you know the drill. So how important are these advanced? I don't want to get into the should I get an MBA conversation. That's old news. But just briefly, how important are these advanced degrees?
I think it's important for not the obvious reasons that people might think, because especially now with super information and even knowledge available widely, I think it's the network you learn to nurture during your school years that's really critical. I still leverage my connections from Stanford's AI program, 15, almost 20 years later.
Wow.
So, I think it's the human-to-human connections that's the most valuable.
Don't let school get in the way of your education. Yeah, good. Okay. So we kind of have to wrap this up. Parting final words, Brent?
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of skepticism, especially in the market, around AI and whether or not we're in an AI bubble, right? I mean, I think so much of that is fused by the fact that, Google search generates more gross profit dollars per year than the entire US automotive industry. And there's almost no switching costs for search. So when someone figures out how to get in a good AI search, Google stands to lose that much dollars. So that's what's driving the AI discussion. I think we need to set all of that aside and say, listen, as those tools get better, there are whole other industries that we can start to apply this to, like medicine, like biology, like chemistry, like physical chemistry, right? And so I think that we need to kind of not get distracted by that, unless that's the business we're in, because the power of what AI is going to be able to do and special things like spatial computing and some of these others, huge opportunities be here that are completely independent of the huge weight that's swinging everything over about how it impacts the world of search.
John, briefly, AI bubble or no?
Not an AI bubble at all. It's AI future. I think I agree with Anthony. I think it's underhyped. It'll change the course of medical care forever.
Yeah. There's a term that people are using, a rational bubble, which speaks to that term. So anyway, it's been a great conversation. Thanks for everybody's insight. yes, this will be and is being recorded. If you want to go back and look at it again, go to the MI10 website, mi10.ai, and there's a YouTube channel. So go to the YouTube channel and you can look at these over and over and over again to your heart's content. So thanks everybody for your contributions. I hope everybody connects to everybody. John, great job. Congratulations on the medical school and everybody else and what you're doing. And we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.
Arlen.
Thanks, everyone.
If people are establishing new schools, MI10 is a great resource to help frame that out. So definitely share that with folks, how to do AI in healthcare.
I absolutely will. Thank you, Sheriff.
All right, take care all. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.